Here we have the real history of the Holocaust. Photographs, artifacts, memories, stories.
It's about learning about our history and learning about our past in order to know where we are now and where we're going.
We do have to study hard history. We do have to take these critical looks and then have those conversations.
Now, more than ever, the Holocaust Center teaches a universal lesson.
This is the epicenter of a community's conscience, not just the Jewish community, but the general community.
It's our obligation to make sure the Holocaust is never forgotten.
The world should be a better world, not the one I lived through.
Good evening and happy International Women's Day. On behalf of tonight's co-presenters, the Zeckelman Holocaust Center and the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History, welcome to this film discussion of the 6888 documentary. Thank you to community partners, Wayne State Gender, Sexuality, and Women's Studies Program, and the University of Detroit Mercy Women's Gender and Studies Program, and Women's and Gender Studies Program, with additional thanks to the PNC Foundation for program support. I'm Yolanda Jack, Manager of Community Engagement at the Wright Museum, and I have the distinct pleasure of introducing tonight's panelists, and I'll begin with our moderator, Nancy Kaffer, who is a Detroit Free Press columnist and a member of their editorial board. She was a recipient of the 2015 Scripps Howard Walker Stone Award for Opinion Writing and the Shorenstein Center's 2016 Nyan Prize. Our first panelist is Edna W. Cummings, who is a business consultant, the producer of the 6888, and a retired Army colonel. She is working to bring recognition to the battalion and to encourage the passage of the 6888 Congressional Gold Medal Act, through which the soldiers would receive Congressional Gold Medals. Last but not least on our panel tonight is Jim Thayers, who is a writer for the Department of Veteran Affairs, an Army veteran, and an independent filmmaker who has written, directed, and produced 3 award-winning documentary films, The 30th of May, The Hello Girls, and The 6888. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight, and welcome, panel.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us tonight. It is so special to be talking about this really remarkable movie on International Women's Day and to talk with the remarkable people who made it. I have to say, I've seen so many movies about war in which the male is omnipresent. There is soldiers lining up for mail call, pensively reading letters. There's voiceovers of mail. I had never thought about the hard work of getting that mail to the soldiers and who had done that work, much less know that this incredibly brave and extraordinary group of women was responsible for such an amazing feat. I would love to start. Edna, would you tell us a little bit about how you learned about this remarkable group of women? And
yes, well, sure, certainly. Thank you for inviting us. I learned about the 6888 probably in 2016 or 17, just reading articles on the internet, and the story caught my eye because the commander's middle name was Edna. So naturally, when I read about a Black woman in the Army who kind of spoke her mind when things didn't go the way she thought, I connected to the story. And then in 2018, I joined a group to raise money to build the monument at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. So that was the beginning of my 6888 journey. But I'm a military brat, so I tell everyone I joined the family business, but I had no idea of the impact of over 6,000 Black women in World War II, and then the 855 women of the 6888.
so, Jim, how did you get involved with this project?
So I was traveling the country, excuse me, with my second film, The Hello Girls.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we do Q&As, when we were on site then, different venues. And so people always come up to me and say, hey, boy, I got a good story for you. So you kind of you listen to folks, but you're evaluating right there on the spot. Well, at two different significant film festivals, people came up to me and said, hey, have you heard about the 6888 women or the Black women who served during World War II? And so then I was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and after the Hello Girls screening, a woman came up to me and said, again, have you heard of these Black women from World War II? And I said, yeah, kinda. And she said, well, one of them lives here in Milwaukee. And that's when I knew. I started researching. I saw a lot of video, a lot of photos, but nothing really comprehensive to tell their story from start to finish. So that's,
You knew there was a story there that needed to be told.
Yep.
So set the scene for us, if one of you could. In that time period, when a woman enlisted in the Women's Auxiliary Corps, what types of jobs could she have expected to be assigned to in the military?
Well, when women enlisted in 1942 was the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps, which later became the Women's Army Corps. And that transition in 1943 allowed the women to have veterans benefits, first of all. Mm-hmm. But the task really until 1978, when things started opening up, secretarial support task, nothing on the front lines of combat, always in the rear. And the interesting part about the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps was that they served with the military or with the Army, and then the Women's Army Corps, they served in the Army. However, the primary purpose was to do those non-combat type skills to release men for combat, so to serve in the rear or behind enemy lines, if to put it in linear terms.
So that wasn't necessarily how it worked out for the 688. I know there's a part in the documentary where they talk about while they're on the ship being transported to England. You're going to tell us about that episode of the journey? They were...
Yes, the 688 sailed for England in early February 1945. And what's interesting, prior to their departure, they trained 2 weeks at Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia, which was a classified training location. You didn't read a lot about Black women training at Fort Oglethorpe. The Army wanted to keep that part of the mission secret to prevent the Germans from detecting their movement. But however, when they sailed on the Ile-de-France, actually departed from New York, they were chased by German U-boats. And that's the nature of warfare, regardless of where the placements are of the troops. It's not always linear. There's no demarcation line. Ideally, there's one drawn, but you can see just it wasn't linear. So the Germans found out about the 6888, and their ship, it was a passenger ship, the Ile-de-France, had to dodge German U-boats before they arrived. And then once they arrived in Glasgow, Scotland, a V-bomb went off, and some of the women had to run for cover. Then on top of that, when they arrived in England, they had to work in blackout conditions, and you could still hear the bombings in the area. So they were in a wartime environment.
I thought that was so interesting. It's like, you might think this is administrative work. Well, it was administrative work in the middle of a war. It's not quite the same thing. So tell us a little bit about Charity Adams Early, who is such an impressive character. She had an amazing education at a time when there were so few professional options for women and even fewer for Black women. Just why don't you tell us a little bit about her background and her life and how she got to this position?
Well, Charity Adams was, she graduated from Wilberforce University undergrad, triple major, math, Latin, and physics. A brilliant woman. She was in grad school at Ohio State when she decided to join the military. And she decided to join. She was the first Black woman to receive a commission, the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps. So that's phenomenal. And she had military experience because before the 6888 was formed, the 6,000 Black women on active duty at the time, Charity commanded units in the military, and she traveled around the United States to oversee or to supervise some of the training of these other Black women. So the 6888 was a hand-picked unit. And what's interesting, none of the women had formal training in postal operations. So I like to think Charity Adams probably was a Mensa. We would have heard about Charity Adams with or without the 6888. And I believe she tackled that mail problem like a math problem. Math, physics major. She saw the throughput, the requirements of processing large volumes of mail to meet the objective. So that's my assessment of Charity. But she stood up for troops, several times within the United States. She was accused of race mixing when she went to an officers club. She stood up to a general over my dead body when he threatened to replace her with a white officer. And then she turned a Red Cross truck around full of recreational supplies and said, "I will not accept segregated facilities from my WACs." Now that's my perspective. Jim, do you have something to add? Your perspective of Charity Adams?
Yep, sure do. From the beginning, I was just mesmerized by what she said, what she did. And I think if I can borrow, I think what for me describes her the best is something her son said in the documentary. He said, my mom, something like this, paraphrasing, my mom always thought or said that she could do anything anyone else could do if given the same chance and opportunity and training. And then he goes on to say that, my mother wasn't overconfident, but and he said, I wish I had the confidence that she has or had. I thought that was a remarkable testimony by a son in about, to sum up his famous mother in about 2 sentences.
That is remarkable, and especially at a time when so much of society was dedicated to telling her that she couldn't do, and that to tear her down and to limit her, that she was able to, she had that strength and she had that resolve that she could do anything. She really is a truly remarkable woman. I want to note to our audience members, thank you so much. I see some more folks have joined us, that we're taking questions in the Q&A button at the bottom of the chat. And if you'd like to add those questions into the Q&A, we'll get to those at the end of our conversation. I can see that there's a lot of folks popping into the chat and things like that, but if you can throw your questions in the Q&A, we will do our best to answer as many as we can over the course of this conversation. You mentioned Charity, or one of you mentioned Charity Adams saying "over my dead body," and I feel like I heard that several times in the movie. That she said that to the person who said that your soldiers can't, or your troops can't stay in my hotel, or the Red Cross hotel. They can't. There was the officer who was going to relieve her of her command and replace her with the white officer. And I love that turn of phrase. That she was drawing the line. This is not happening. She really knew her value and knew the value of the women she commanded.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that went a long way, because everyone we spoke with talked about how much they respected her. And that's the way a leader earns respect, by standing up for the organization, or in this case, the troops. And she definitely did that on several occasions. And regardless of her gender or her race, if you are a major, you do not tell a general "over my dead body" under any circumstances. So that was a bold move, regardless of race or gender. But I think he got the point.
Well, and there were a couple of pivotal points in the story where, when someone was targeting her in that way, she stood up to them. And there was a time at the end where the captain said, "If you're not going to accept her authority, you can get off my ship." So she had clearly won the respect of her fellow service members as well.
Right. Absolutely.
I thought that was really cool, that she had that command of that kind of respect, even though there were people who didn't respect her. There were people who were willing to stand beside her like that. So you talked about the women training in Georgia. I noticed throughout the documentary, we heard about how members of the 688 encountered discrimination and racism, starting from training, when they were on the train to go down to Georgia, and they disembarked, and there were whites here, blacks here, like you said, they attended a theater, even among other members of the service in England where they were stationed. Talk a little bit about that environment and what it was like for them as Black women, American troops in that environment.
Edna, I'll go first real briefly.
Yeah, sure.
As a white male, I don't think we ever come up against something like that. We just don't. And the world is slowly changing, but I like all of us, when I think the most poignant piece for me was when Indiana Hunt Martin was talking about coming down from New York, and they had to change trains in Washington, D.C. And that was the first time she had seen all these signs, colored, and all this and that. And what struck me, what she didn't say, but what I immediately thought of was, here she is going to war in our nation's capital, and she can't use the same bathrooms as other American citizens. And I think, although I admired the women along the way, once I started to understand that more, I admired them even more. And so that's what I wanted to say about that.
Yeah. Well, it was Jim Crow America. Segregation was legal. And if you broke those laws, you paid the price. The women in the United States in uniform, in the documentary, we touched on it, but not a lot. They were beaten, spat on. I know a 104-year-old who lives in Maryland was spat at. And I asked her, I said, "How could you withstand that while you're in uniform?" And her response to me, I'll never forget it. She says, "But I also remember the kindness," because similar to Charity Adams, another people who suffered discrimination, even though there were a lot of people against them, there were people in leadership, positions of leadership, who stood up for the 688 and the uniformed services because of discrimination. Charity talks about how General Lee and some other white officers, embraced her, supported her. And I think it took that for someone to stand up, or even the white captain on the ship coming back who stood behind her and said, Charity is right. So it's like a military term. You don't want to go at it alone. She took a hard stance, but in the end, she did have whites who supported her. And I can only think, what would our lives be like without that discrimination always hanging over? Imagine what these women could have accomplished, or anyone could accomplish, without being discriminated against, without having to worry about being harassed because of your race or harassed because of your gender, just at the basic levels, that human dignity that they had to fight for. So it was a fight for human dignity. And I believe that when the 688 went to Europe, they knew that they were breaking barriers and opening doors for the women in the United States who had a much harder time, because the United States did not embrace African Americans in uniform. It wasn't until 48 until Truman integrated the armed forces. So prior to then, segregation was legal in society, and that's something that you had to deal with. And again, what would life been like? What could they have accomplished, without that umbrella?
And, I had it really is something to think about, and what they did accomplish even with that, with those barriers and those obstacles and that denigration is truly remarkable. I had read before accounts of Black soldiers who had fought overseas to come home and be treated with disrespect. And I had not realized until I saw this documentary that that had happened to Black women too. And that must have been such whiplash to go from Europe, where society was more fair, more equal, to come back home after having served your country.
Right.
Treated that way. So
yeah, World War I think those soldiers had it far worse. Some of them were hung while in uniform returning. So that's a history of discrimination and abuse against African Americans in the military. I just think the 688 as women, because that's not something women did. A lot of them didn't talk about their service because of the stigma as a woman in uniform. And that stigma prevailed for a very long time. And it's getting better, obviously, but just that umbrella, why would a lady do something like that? So it was.
Yeah.
No, and I've talked to one or two of the women, or families of the women, who even prior to going over and then coming home were misled about their GI Bill, told they weren't eligible. And then I remember distinctly one family, one granddaughter told me that her grandmother said that that the recruiting station or wherever was not going to allow her to sign for that $10,000, basically death benefit for the family. And he didn't let her do it. Edna, that was the Campbells told me that.
All right, yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard of those type stories, or even when the death benefit was received. My mom actually told me a story where the Black family, the guy just tore it up in front of her and said, "You'll never see a dime of it." So that a lot of that happened, and it's not fabricated. It's hard to believe that these Black veterans were denied benefits. But fortunately, a lot of the 688, when they returned from the United States, they used the GI Bill, the educational benefits, to continue their education. You saw Elizabeth Barker Johnson, the first woman to attend Winston-Salem State University on the GI Bill, who marched across the stage in 2019. So that was a fantastic moment. 70 years later, she was able to receive her diploma.
And that was part of Edna's cyber world connection. Wasn't that a tweet and a tag?
A little bit more. I knew some people at Winston as well.
Yeah.
But we helped to amplify that story, to say the least. So we definitely did that.
So I just I thought the way that this story was told visually was really interesting. And I think to put that story together, when you had surviving members of the 6AAA, but not that many, many of them are gone, unfortunately. You had archival footage, you had some current events like that. Can you talk a little bit about the process of building that compelling visual component?
Well, the first thing is that thank goodness for modern technology and Google searches and the National Archives. That's where the footage, the film footage, which is all that we know of exists. That's where I found that. And then I think the next best thing I did is I realized that I needed two producers, Edna and Liz Helm Frazier, both retired Army, and both, of course, Black women. And I needed that perspective, and that perspective saved me a couple of times when I was going through telling this part of a story, and then I was influenced by what I'd seen on TV, and I wanted to portray this sequence of women, Black women, showing angry faces to something that they may or may not have even really reacted to. I was just going to pull it individually. And Edna said, well, Jim, you're the director, but she asked me to go back and look at the film footage, the ones that I had taken and the ones that had archival. And she said, if you find angry Black women there, then do it your way. So guess what? We did it her way, because I didn't find angry Black women at all. I found women that were proud of their service, humble about their service. And so that kind of changed my perspective. So once you kind of learn that, it's really just, I kind of like to go through chronologically and find the interviews. They all get about the same length interviews, and I kind of the same questions. And so you want to, you try to piece that together, that story together with the narrative. Other people use voiceover. I don't like using voiceover when I got the real people, So that's kind of how I do that. I know it's kind of a circular thing, but it isn't linear. I try to make it linear, but it's really not.
I thought that the interviews with the surviving members were amazing. And I thought the archival footage was just so striking. Being able to see them so just young and energetic, and that pride you could see on their face and the dedication. I thought it was really beautifully put together, and it really it's a dynamic, incredible story. And I thought the images just paired perfectly to tell us that. So bravo, both of you. As you can tell, I really enjoyed the film. And I think our whole audience did too, based on the number of questions we're getting here that we will get to very shortly. So let's talk quickly about the actual work they did. They cleared 17 million pieces of mail in 3 months?
3 months, yeah. What's interesting, I really appreciate the Afro newspaper and the Black press, because the mainstream newspaper did not cover a lot of stories from Black soldiers. You have a few stories here, the same photos. But because of our work with this documentary, families shared a lot of photos. I was able to go into the Afro newspaper archives, and I saw an article 30 days prior to the 6AAA arriving. There were 3,600 tons of mail, 130,000 bags of mail offloaded in record time again by some colored troops or Negro troops in France. So that was just that part of the theater, and then part of that mail was routed. And based on the information from Charity Adams' book and the Army records, they were able to clear a backlog of approximately 17 million pieces. They processed 65,000 pieces of mail per shift. That's 195,000 pieces of mail manually sorting every day. Now, of course, that 65,000, that was probably peak performance, but based on the article that I found 30 days prior, and just talking with the women, how the mail was just stored in hangars and was rat infested, and 7,500 Robert Smiths or mail addressed to Junior. I mean, it was remarkable because other units had tried and failed. And so the 6888, they solved the Army's male and morale problem during World War II. And I think, again, Charity Adams saw it as a math problem. Performance, yes, but she figured it out how to get it done.
I thought it was such an interesting comment. Can you explain a little bit more about what you mean by that, the way she brought her math and physics and science background to it?
Well, because you look at these warehouses full of mail, and the traditional operation, probably 12, 16 hours a day, so you 8 hours. But I believe just by using her leadership skills and analytical skills, she probably saw a way to, first of all, she had to set up a small city. The unit was self-sustaining because it was a segregated unit. So they had to, repair their own trucks, the mess hall or dining facilities. They had to do everything and take care of the mail. So it requires, I call it some linear thinking. All right, what are the priority tasks? In her book, she talks about that, how she just went down the list. These are the top things that I have to take care of. So we call it in the military, eating an elephant. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So those bites, there's no such thing as a day. And I guess I'm kind of passionate about this because I've worked in operation centers. You don't see the light of day. You don't know what time it is. And you focus on the task. And there's no such thing as a 24-hour day because an 8-hour shift is not always an 8-hour shift. You have a shift change, and then you have to brief the person who's coming on the shift. And when you leave, you got to brief the person and so forth and so on. So it's probably really 8 to 10 hours. So the 24-hour cycle goes out. You get a minimum of 8 hours if you're lucky to sleep. So I just think she saw these warehouses and hangars full of mail. And all right, I can just envision her because we went to Birmingham, England, and saw, some of the areas. She just probably said, all right, I'll break this down. And that's exactly what she did. She started out by assigning the women letters of the alphabet. You saw in the documentary, somebody had the Z's, 26, letters in the alphabet. So she broke the women down like a manufacturing chain, or she set up a mail sorting factory. So about alphabetical, and then by APO, that's Army Post Office, and they had the router cards. And so she's refined the system. Instead of having the mail just sent out, she said the mail came back after a couple of tries, we declare it as undeliverable. And she probably told the women, open the mail, do some detective work, connect the dots. That's an operational term. Connect the dots when you read, something about the soldier to find out who is the right Robert Smith. So they had to do detective work. They had to set up this, mail supply chain or mail factory. And I think it just took those types of skills and understanding how to, problem solve at that level to get the job done. And obviously, it worked.
And that's when we spoke about this before our panel tonight. You told me that leadership is what makes this story so great. And I think you've just described her leadership and the way she she understood the job, and she valued herself and her troops and marshaled the resources to do it. And
absolutely.
That was another
and set up a small city in the process, or a garrison, hair salon, dining facility, repair shops. None of these women had experience in, these military skills. So it was on the job training, and that took a lot of leadership and talent and just hard work to figure it out. On the job training.
Yeah, and one of the things with also, I love their slogan, no male, low morale. And with all the interviews of surviving members of the 6888, it came through to me that they understood what they had done was honorable work, that they had served profoundly, that they had changed the lives of the soldiers who received their mail. And that really just, you really felt that come through. They understood they had done something remarkable. I thought that was great, the way it was captured in the movie. So I also, changing courses just a little bit, I was really struck by the affinity some of those members had for Joan of Arc. When they were in France, they went to visit the site where Joan of Arc was burned at the stake in 1431. Either one of you, why do you think these members of the 6888 felt such a connection to Joan of Arc?
And if you want to go first, I got something I want to connect between the Hello Girls and the 6888 when you're finished, if you want.
Well, quickly, a lot of these women were very well read, educated. Charity Adams, Abby Knoll, a lot of these college graduates. And one lady mentioned she had read about the Ile de France. So they were tuned into history. And because of World War II, I'm sure that was amplified because several of them had loved ones. So these are historical landmarks. So just to have the opportunity to see these landmarks and places up close and personal, that's something that as the 6888 and people in general just love to experience. So the military and serving overseas gave them a chance to see history and live history and go to Napoleon's quarters and the Joan of Arc parade. Just, other, and in Paris, the shopping, you heard about that. I mean, that would be exciting now, let alone in 1945. Jim?
I wonder if you got the sense that they felt a connection as a female soldier who had also been persecuted, who had been doubted and put down and, eventually, of course, killed by the people around her. I thought that struck me as kind of poignant, that connection there.
Right, absolutely.
And I think when they learned that they were either in or very close to the city, Rouen, where she was ultimately burned at the stake, I mean, you're right. That kind of had to resonate with them, that type of persecution. Now, the one connection I wanted to make very interesting is that my second film, The Hello Girls, about World War I women who were Signal Corps telephone operators working in France. 223 of them, their big hurdle when they got back is they weren't recognized for 60 years as soldiers. But what I wanted to connect was that the Hello Girls in World War I had a very much of affinity to Joan of Arc as the 6888 women did. There's photos that I show in the Hello Girls where you can see in the background a poster of Joan of Arc, and they talked about Joan of Arc. So I found that to be very interesting that both groups of women, different ethnicities and races, found a common soul in Joan of Arc.
That is really interesting. So one of the things when we were talking about this before the panel, Jim, that is important to you is to talk about. So only 4 women are buried at Normandy, and 3 of them are from the 6888. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that? About other women from the battalion who are buried in military cemeteries and what it means for a service member to have that honor?
Yeah, but first, I want to. This is in part Edna's research as well, and I wanted to take the question because I work for the National Cemetery Administration, part of VA, so I have a clear, understanding of what that goes through of dignified burial. And so we found it we knew when I learned that of the almost 10,000 Americans that are buried at Normandy American Cemetery, probably the most recognizable. You see it in Saving Private Ryan, and then we found out, that only 4 women out of 10,000 are buried there, and 3 came from the 6888, which is kind of incredible. You learn in the documentary that the Army didn't want to really do much with them. And this is where, again, the extraordinary leadership, the officers and the NCOs said, no, we are not going to let our women go out like this. And they got them proper burials. Well, then the other 2 places where I want folks to know is that 14 of the women are buried at Arlington National Cemetery. And at least 30 of the women, probably more, but 30 of the women are buried in VA national cemeteries across the country, a lot of them up in the New York area. So, the good news there is that when the women went and the families went to avail themselves of burial benefits, whether it was Arlington or whether it was VA national cemeteries, I can't detect through the records that there was any real resistance to that, and that there aren't segregated plots in VA national cemeteries. Arlington, there is, but so anyways, yeah, I just want folks to know that you know, history has embraced the women in VA National Cemeteries, Arlington, and then certainly Normandy American Cemetery overseas, and I feel really good about that.
Well, thank you. Let's start taking some reader questions now. We have got a lot that have come in. Audience questions. They're not readers. I work at a newspaper, guys. Michael asks, did any of the women get jobs with the Postal Service upon their return, or did gender or race prevent them from securing those jobs?
I don't know of any who got jobs at post office. Some of their family members did, but I am not aware of any who worked at the post office. Jim, not offhand. Maybe.
You know, no, I think there's probably, you know what, out of 855 women, there's probably a small percentage that said, hey, this is the route for me. But a lot of the women, as we noted earlier, got the GI Bill, worked their way into middle class and other professions. Like Abby Campbell was a dietitian at Tuskegee VA Medical Center in Alabama. We know of Charity and her work as an administrator. Millie Dunn-Veazey out of North Carolina became I think Edna was a vice president of the regional NAACP.
She was the president. She was the first female president of the NAACP in Wake County, North Carolina. Right. And then Barker Johnson.
See how quickly history, how I said it wrong, and now it could have gone into the record if Edna hadn't corrected me. And that's why it's got to be very close custodians. So, but yeah, Indiana Hunt Martin, she worked for the government after. I read some profiles of women working for the VA as a chief treasurer, one woman. So yeah, as Edna said earlier, these women were educated before, and many of them realized that the Army was a path to maybe more education, and God bless them, they took it. They really did.
Audience member Vicky says her father fought for the U.S. Army at the Battle of the Bulge in the Colmar Pocket. Says, from what I can tell, he and his fellow soldiers did not stay in the same place for very long. How did the 688 know how to locate soldiers who had mail as they changed locations so often? And she notes that she is confident that that mail did increase their morale.
Oh, wow. Well, that was part of the challenge. You're absolutely right. And that's why the mail was backlogged, because of the fast moving soldiers and the nature of warfare at the time. So when a soldier went to a new location, that soldier was supposed to fill out a locator card and return it. But sometimes by the time the locator card reached the postal unit, in this case, the 6888, the soldier had relocated, because most of the time, especially Battle of the Bulge and that period, D-Day and beyond, no one stayed in a place for 30 days. So that was the challenge. So that's how they did it. The soldiers, when you got to a new location, it's kind of like a change of address card. We call them locator cards. They're supposed to fill out a locator card, and then it would get returned to the rear, the communication zone, where the postal unit and support elements were. And that's how the 6888 found out where the soldiers were. So it was up to that soldier to fill out the locator card and return it. But you can see the logistics problem there.
And that's where that detective work you mentioned comes in.
Exactly.
Yeah. Another audience member asked, did any of the ladies remain in England after the war, knowing they would return to a segregated society in America?
Not that we know of. They did return back for a reunion back in '81. Some of the women did to Birmingham, England, with the Lord Mayor, but none of the women returned to live there. However, some of the women did remain and retire. Fanny Griffin was a lieutenant in the Army with the 6888. She came back, got out of the Army, and then joined the Air Force. So she retired as a major and broke all kind of barriers in the Air Force. Bertha Dupree, I think she retired from the Army as well, Jim, the unknown, unclaimed veteran.
Oh, yeah, she did. Yeah. And she
right.
That's a good point. And I want to bring out is that several of the women, and we could probably even bump that up to many of the women, several of the women, stayed in the reserves after they came back. They stayed in the WWII reserves. Bernice Dupree Harrison was one of them, who lived to be 97, but she was activated and was one of the few, during that time, certainly of women, that served in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. She was activated, probably not in country for Korea and Vietnam. Nonetheless, though, her country called and she went back to service. So the women did that. Hey, I wanted to mention that Edna, one of the ladies, Karen Jordan. Hi,
Yeah,
Karen.
right. Annie Knight
Have you
Jordan.
seen
I
that?
saw that.
Yeah.
Yes,
Oh
I
my
did.
gosh.
We see you, the Jordan family. We're aware of your story. Yes.
Oh,
and we
I've
wrote
seen
about
this,
her. Yes, from DC. She was buried. She's buried in Arlington Cemetery. Annie Knight Jordan. She contacted us, our research team. Her family did, and we received her obituary. So thank you for that. Yes, so we are aware of Miss Jordan. Yes.
Well, what an honor to have you in the audience tonight, Ms. Jordan.
I know. Isn't that amazing?
Well,
yes.
And this is what you were saying, is that you're expanding the 688 family all the time. This is really, and you were watching them in action.
So for the folks that I uploaded a PDF, it says 6888 Hallowed Ground, and it lists the women that are in the VA National Cemeteries, then Arlington, and then overseas. So if you download that or just have a look at that, I don't think it's a complete exhaustive list yet, especially in VA National Cemeteries. But we're going to continue to look, and we'll add to that document as needed.
Right, and we're having a 6888 day in Arlington at the Women's Memorial on the 15th of June. So just save that date. So hopefully you can visit some of those grave sites in Arlington, and the Women's Memorial that has a display with 6888.
So audience member Sarah says, as a Black female in the military, and thank you for your service, Sarah, I want to ask, are they proud of the path they forged for us in the military now?
I know I am proud, and especially with the award of the Congressional Gold Medal. The 6888 is the only women's military unit to receive the Congressional Gold Medal. The only other unit was the Women Air Service Pilots, but they were not considered veterans until 1977. So the 6888 becomes the first and only female military unit serving in military status to receive the Congressional Gold Medal. So that is historical. Less than 200 medals have been awarded, and that is a civilian award. It's the nation's highest honor. The first recipient, George Washington, less than 200 of these medals have been awarded. The 6888, that legislation passed on the 28th of February. I was in Speaker Pelosi's office on the 3rd of March. She signed the bill, and now it's with the president. So we have secured the 6888's legacy, alongside other national greats. So yes, and thanks to everyone in the audience. I'm sure we have some supporters out there. So
yeah. No, yes. I think if we were doing a live event, you would have just gotten a big standing ovation on that note. So, so another question from our chat. Someone asks, you mentioned many of the women were able to utilize the GI Bill for education. I thought that was not provided to non-white service members, or am I thinking of housing benefits? This person is asking.
Housing. Okay. Primarily housing, because a lot of the women use the educational benefits, and especially Ms. Dolores Rudock, she looked forward to her subsistence and the educational benefits. She went to fashion school. Barker Johnson went to Winston-Salem State University. I believe Millie Dunn-Vesey, went to, college. So a lot of women use that educational benefits to the GI Bill.
Well, and going back to the memorial of remembering the women of the 6888, we learned in our pre-panel discussions that there were members from Detroit and Hamtramck and Pontiac, and from our area. I don't know that we have their names handy, but that Michigan is represented in the 6888 ranks, which is very exciting, I think, for all of us here. So one of our audience members had asked a question I wanted to get to, and I have now lost it in our Q&A. She was asking if the folks who were denied, oh, here we are, Montisa had asked, if the families that were denied death benefits and other benefits they were entitled to, have they been recognized? Have they been able to access death benefits? Has there been some type of reparation for them?
I'm not aware of any anything like that. No.
Yeah, I am not either. The death benefits, if you're speaking of the women who are buried in Normandy, keep in mind there are 10,000 soldiers buried in Normandy. And so family death benefits, from World War II, that is not something that I'm aware of in those women in their family status. And I've reached out to some of the families, but they died so young, 26 years old, and it's not a lot known, about these women, just for at least one of the families I reached out to and spoke with. So no, I do not know.
Another audience member says, given that Charity Adams was already a major at the time the 688 was formed, she must have served for quite some time and have accumulated some merit. Do you know when she was enlisted and if she had medals?
No, she was not enlisted. She was commissioned when she went through the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps. I believe the rank was 3rd lieutenant, 2nd lieutenant, then captain, or something like that. She graduated as a captain. It was like a direct commission as a captain, maybe not sure what the rank. But what's interesting, I'm glad somebody mentioned that. I was in the Army close to 26 years. It took me 18 years to make lieutenant colonel. It took me probably 15, 14, I don't even know anymore, to make major. Charity Adams was commissioned as a captain. She made major maybe a year or so later. When she retired, she didn't retire. When she left the military, she'd made lieutenant colonel in about 3.5 years. There was only one 06 position in the Army, and that was the director. So not only was she the first Black woman to become an officer in the military, she was also the highest ranking woman, one of the highest ranking women in the World War II era, because there's only one 06, and she was an 05 or a lieutenant colonel. So 3.5 years, that's just an idea of how smart and well-respected she was. And she got out because she didn't want to go to the Pentagon. And I worked at the Pentagon. I do understand why she resigned. She got out of the military. And plus she thought she could do more for civil rights as a civilian.